say, my hormones are out of balance, should they blame the hormone?
No, they should blame the environment that the hormones are in.
Welcome to the Wisdom of the Body podcast. I'm your host, Heather Grzych. Here, we talk about the profound connection between mind, body, and spirit. Join me and other authors, wellness experts, and everyday individuals talk about the importance of listening to our bodies, trusting our guts, and living in deeper harmony with nature. So, whether you're seeking guidance on your wellness journey or simply looking for inspiration, you're in the right place. We're thrilled to be in the top 3% of podcasts globally. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and most other places where people listen to podcasts. You can follow by joining my email list at heathergrzych.com or by following me on Instagram at Heather Grzych. That's Heather, Grzych. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Dr. Kela Smith, who is a holistic, integrative fertility and hormone doctor. She holds a PhD in natural and holistic medicine, as well as double board certification as a doctor of natural medicine and a doctor of humanitarian medicine. Dr. Kela is also a board certified functional nutritionist and a 5 times board certified health coach. She founded the Hormone Puzzle Society and the Hormone Puzzle Society Educational Institute. She has a Hormone Puzzle Society. She's got a podcast, Hormone Puzzle Podcast. She runs a bunch of summits. She's digging deep here in the fertility and hormonal and reproduction space here. And she's an expert on all kinds of things related to reproductive health and hormones. And we're going to answer a lot of questions that people have today about hormones and what they are and what they do and where they need to be, all that stuff. So, yeah. So, Dr. Kela, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Heather. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yes. Welcome to the Wisdom of the Body podcast. Yeah. So, let's get into it. What the heck is a hormone?
Yeah, so hormones are chemical messengers that your body produces to tell your body how to perform. So they're everything from in your thyroid to your reproductive system, even in your gut. Everywhere in your body, these chemicals are making it perform optimally or not.
That's funny. You know, it's like everybody says, oh, my hormones are out of whack, or it's interesting. We all think we know what a hormone is because we certainly seem to like talk about them all the time, but they're chemical messengers, right? They're relaying a message. Interesting. Where do those messages come from?
Yeah, so from your endocrine system. So this is a system in the body, and these are little glands that release these chemicals that tell, and all of your cells have receptor sites on them that allow the message to be heard and come through. And that's why when somebody says they have hormone imbalance, sometimes it can be, well, a couple different things. It can be a block in your endocrine system where the chemicals are just not being produced the way that they need to be. The hormones are not being produced. It can also be where there's blocks where the signals are. So different systems are not picking up the messages that the endocrine system is releasing. So think of it as like this message highway, if you will. And all these messengers are going to different places in the body and saying, hey, you need to do this. You need to release these hormones to make a baby or have optimal gut health or to have the brain function optimally. So it's really like a transportation messenger system, if you will.
Yeah, I love the way you explain that. You know, I think a lot of people, it's once you hear somebody say it, that there are things in your body that send messages, and then there are things that receive messages, and that both of those, there could be problems on either end or in the transfer process, like the middle part of that. It makes complete sense. And obviously, you know, unless you've studied biomedicine, you might not know exactly what those parts are, or if you've studied anatomy and physiology, which most people kind of have not studied these things. So
Right.
when we're learning about our bodies, it's kind of a common thing for people to go through. Why don't I know any of this? Why do you think we're not taught more about our bodies like when we're growing up?
Yeah, that's $1 million question right there. I mean, I always say I want to go back to 7th grade health class and teach at least menstrual health and, women about their bodies and how they perform and how babies are made, but we're just not taught that. And I don't know why. That's a great question. We're just not.
Yeah. And men have hormones too. It's not like women seem to talk about them more because ours fluctuate more in certain phases of our lives. But men have them too, right? They have hormones too.
Yeah, men have hormones too. It's a little bit different though, because a men's hormonal clock is 24 hours. Most of their hormones are circulating every 24 hours and changing, mainly testosterone, but they also have, estrogen, progesterone, all the same hormones that women have. But women, on the other hand, their hormone clock is every 28 days if they're a regular cycling woman. If they're not, if they're in perimenopause, I mean, it could go all the way up to 30 to 40 days. That's why so many women will have hormone imbalances, because there's so many different places where that structure can go awry over those 28 to 40 days versus a 24-hour hormone clock.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Don't we know it?
I know. We're speaking to the choir. Yep.
Okay. So when it comes to hormones, what are some of the problems that can happen when the hormones are not, well, there could be multiple problems, right? One of the hormones are not at the level that they should be.
Correct.
One is that they're not being communicated or transferred. There's an issue with transfer. So, what do you think? When do we know something like that is happening in our body with our hormones?
Sure. So, anytime you have a symptom that is more than just a minor inconvenience, that means there's something wrong. That's your body's way of sounding an alarm and saying, hey, you need to listen to me. Something's going on here. So, this could be everything from a hot flash, a night sweat, a skin issue. Maybe you have acne at certain points of the cycle. Maybe you have eczema, rosacea. Could be a problem in the gut. Could be a problem with the menstrual cycle. Any issue that is more than just a minor inconvenience can be a symptom that something is wrong, and you need to look a little deeper to find out what it is.
Yeah. And it might be a hormone issue, right?
Exactly.
And okay.
Yes.
So I know that you love to talk about functional labs, and let's get into that. What are functional labs? Let's start with that.
Sure. So functional labs are lab tests that look at things a little differently than traditional labs. Traditional labs, usually blood work, this is going to show us a snapshot in time of what's happening right when something is tested. So take hormones for an example. Hormones fluctuate so often, even some studies say every 15 minutes, a woman's hormones are fluctuating. And so when we're trying to capture that in blood work, it's just what's happening right then in that moment. And it could change 5 to 10 minutes later. Whereas when we're looking at functional labs, we're not just looking at what the levels are, but we're looking at, okay, well, how is the body using these hormones? How are they being methylated, which means made into a usable form, neutralized? And how are they being detoxed? That's the other piece that blood work is never going to show us. So an example of this is, say, estrogen. You might check your estrogen in blood work and everything might be normal or, basic. Whereas if you check it in functional labs, maybe you're not detoxing your estrogen. And so therefore the levels are normal, but you have too much. It's not leaving the body the way that it needs to. And so it's going to cause issues within your estrogen. And so that's going to cause things like hot flashes or night sweats or acne or, all the things we discussed earlier. So that's one piece of it. Functional labs are just taking a deeper look. Also, the levels within functional labs, we're looking for optimal. We want to look at, one, why is the body performing in a non-optimal way? What is the root cause of why this is happening? But then we want to make sure that the levels are optimal. Everything is kind of performing the way that it should. And then also with functional labs versus traditional labs, we're looking at you as a whole person. We're looking at all your symptoms. We're looking at your past, present, future health and teaming that with what we see on the labs. So instead of just looking at one individual system or one symptom and really treating based on symptoms, we're looking at the whole person and how can we heal that person to make everything work optimally. So those are the main differences.
Okay. When you say whole person, it's like other systems of the body that might be affecting the narrowly focused target that we're looking at, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I want to heal the body and make it perform optimally. Whereas with traditional labs, they're just looking at, okay, what are the symptoms? How do we treat the symptoms? How do we prescribe a prescription, do a procedure, a surgery? They're not really looking at, why is this happening in the first place? Let's look to heal.
Yeah. That's so funny. Like, not funny. It's really
Ironic.
sad.
Yeah.
Well, it's just one of my clients the other day was like, why didn't my doctor ask me this question that you're asking? And I'm like, okay, well, it's probably because they had like 15 minutes with you. I mean, it's just like, what do you think to figure these things out? I mean, we need data points and we need to be able to envision what's going on inside a person. We need to know what's coming in and what's coming out and how it's mixing and how one biomarker is impacting one part of the body as observed through a biomarker in a blood test. We learn about that, how it's affecting another part of a body, an organ, or an aspect of the blood or something. And that might be off, and start to develop a mental picture, a visualization of what's happening inside a person in order to understand the disease process. Or you might use a different word. We would call it, we'd have a Sanskrit word for it in Ayurveda, but like it's
The
essentially
dis-ease.
the imbalance process or the disease
Uh-huh.
process, to really figure out like, oh, if all this was supposed to be running perfectly, it's not. This is actually how it's like functioning. This is what's going on. To try to find all that information takes a long time. It doesn't happen in a moment.
Exactly. Exactly. And two, with conventional medicine, that's not how they're trained. They're not trained to look at how can we heal. They're trained to look at how can we treat a symptom. And I always say, like, if you break your leg, like, yeah, go to your conventional emergency room and get them to set your leg. We can't fix your leg. But if you have something like an autoimmune condition, infertility, heart disease, diabetes, we want to help you heal. We don't want to just put you on a prescription or give you a surgery for that. We need to find out, okay, why do you have this in the first place? Let's take away that trigger and then that will go away.
Yeah. No, it's just from my previous life working for an insurance company. Like, I remember, okay, you have like diagnosis codes and you have all these medical procedures, and it's like some of them are considered preventive and some of them are, they all have their different categorizations. And it seems as if our medical system, and most of us, when we experience the medical system, it's really dealing with this more emergency based or sick care system. Like, there's a symptom and we have to do it. Some people call that the allopathic system.
Mhm.
And that's the majority of the system. And then you have all these like wellness practitioners on the other end of that, people that are working on prevention. And then also stuff you do at home is considered prevention. Stuff going on in society is prevention. But there's this middle part, which is, I have something that I want to understand the process. I want to understand how this is being created because it's something I think I can influence. And to me, like the kind of work that you do, the kind of work that people like me do, it's like in this part. And I think that word functional kind of comes up a lot because it's really, how do you understand how something is functioning and improve how something is functioning, right?
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
goal, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. So, more about hormones, since everybody's confused about their bodies. They read these books, they're like, okay, my hormone levels should be here. They're not here. Or their blood test comes back and it says, oh, my progesterone's low, right? That's a common one. Or estrogen's too high or estrogen's too low. What are the implications when our hormones are out of balance, specifically those sex hormones?
Yeah. Well, one, it's going to give you a lot of symptoms that are going to be, unmanageable, and you're not going to feel good when your hormones are out of balance, especially estrogen. Estrogen's a really nasty one. It does a lot of good in the body, but if it's too high, it can cause a lot of issues with menstrual cycle health and heavy periods and painful periods and hot flashes and night sweats and all cravings and just so many unpleasant symptoms where we're just not going to feel good. So that's the first thing. It's just if we have a hormone imbalance, especially in our sex hormones, we're not going to feel good. The second thing is if you're trying to get pregnant and your estrogen, progesterone specifically are off, you're not going to be able to get pregnant naturally. That's something that we need to fix. Especially, again, estrogen is controlling our menstrual cycle. It's controlling how it performs, the thickening of the lining of the uterus, how healthy we ovulate, if we ovulate at all. Then progesterone is kind of a close second. That's also controlling how the fertilized egg is able to implant, how it's able to stick and not miscarry. And so these things need to be in balance. So the first thing is we want to feel good, and then we want our body to perform the way that it was made to perform. And so that's kind of the second thing. So if you have hormone imbalance, then that's something that we need to fix.
And it's something people want even if they're not trying to have a baby, right?
Exactly. If you want to go into menopause should not be terrible. Everybody thinks it's this awful thing. Western culture has taught us we need to dread it and that it's terrible. Well, in other countries and other cultures, menopause means a new beginning. It's your second, I forget what it's called, like your second coming of life. And it's supposed to be this beautiful thing that's celebrated. And it shouldn't, if your hormones are in balance and healthy, it shouldn't be painful. You shouldn't struggle with all the symptoms that we're told are just normal and we have to deal with as a woman. Your period stops, and that marks menopause. Menopause is only a day event. It's the day your period has gone away for 1 year. That you're menopause. The next day, you're in postmenopause. And you should really have no symptoms of that. And so if you're in menopause and you're having a lot of crazy symptoms, weight gain and cravings, and again, hot flashes and night sweats. I know I say that one a lot, but that one is one of the most common things that we hear about in menopause. That means that our hormones are imbalanced and we need to fix our hormones, get our hormones into balance, and then those symptoms should go away. Menopause should be beautiful and not something to fear.
Well, I haven't been through it yet, but I'll tell you how it goes.
5 minutes. It's wonderful. I feel like I'm 20. No symptoms. I have it's wonderful. So
See, okay, this is
I'm almost
possibly
50 and it's beautiful. Yeah.
this is possibly the first time anybody has heard someone say that. Some people, they hear it's really bad. Okay, so here's the deal. When our hormones are out of balance, and I'd love to go into some of the specific ones that everybody asks about, like you mentioned estrogen, but maybe in progesterone, maybe we could go into that a little bit more. But when people notice that their hormones are out of balance and they say, my hormones are out of balance, should they blame the hormone?
No, they should blame the environment that the hormones are in, because it's not the hormones' fault that they're out of balance. It's the environment. Usually, when I see hormone imbalance, it has to do with three things. So, the first is toxicities. All the toxins that are around us, everywhere from our air to our water to our food, our environment, our cleaning supplies, our beauty supplies, all of that is endocrine disruptors that causes the hormones to be out of balance. So that's really the first place I look, is toxins. Then also imbalances. I find a lot of people, they have nutrient imbalances. They don't realize they have mineral imbalances. They're eating a standard American diet, which I call the SAD diet, because it really does just, the hormones go awry when we're eating a SAD diet. So those are probably the main things that I see: the toxins, deficiencies, imbalances. The third thing is inflammation. Again, we're surrounded by physical toxins, also mental and emotional toxins, the stress, the belief systems, the stories that we tell ourselves, the diagnoses that we get. All of that causes internal inflammation. And that's another place where I look and say, okay, this is one of the triggers that is causing your hormone imbalances. So those are really the three things that I find cause the most issues with the majority of people.
So when we think about what a lot of people want to do when they find out that their hormones are out of balance, they want to take that hormone. Do you recommend people take that hormone, or do you recommend that they do something else to change the system that's creating and influencing the creation of that, or the elimination of that hormone?
Yeah. So, first thing I would say, and I know we're going to get into this, but I would look at, well, before I even go there with testing, first we want to lay the foundations. That's the first place that you can start at home if you're having symptoms, that any of these symptoms that we've talked about here today. really look at your foundational health. What does your diet look like? What does your nutrition look like? Are you eating a good balanced diet of protein, fat, good healthy carbs, lots of vegetables, lots of variety, organic foods, clean water? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you managing your stress? Are you working on your nervous system? Are you eliminating environmental toxins through beauty care and cleaning products and all of those things that we mentioned? So that would be the first place I would start. Many of those things are free. You can work on your sleep tonight. It's not going to cost you anything. And so that's the first place I would start. If you have a hormonal imbalance, look at your lifestyle, look at your nutrition. If you're listening to this and you're like, Dr. Kela, I'm doing all of that and I still am having some issues with some symptoms, then that's when I would say, let's look at some labs. Let's do some functional labs, look a little deeper. Let's see if you have an issue with, your detox pathways or not performing optimally. Do you have something like adrenal fatigue, or are your stress hormones out of balance? Do you have an issue in the thyroid? Is your thyroid detoxing appropriately? And let's look at these labs and say, okay, what system or systems and what hormones are really being affected? And then we look at you again as a whole person. We look at the labs and we say, okay, this is off. This is how we would treat with. Maybe we do need to add some bioidentical estrogen. Maybe you do need to add DHEA or progesterone or something, I'd always do bioidentical. I don't like to do the pellets or the synthetic hormones. I just think we need to work with our body as much as possible. And so, but I would never add anything in isolation. It's not as simple as looking and saying, okay, you have low estrogen, let's add estrogen and that's it. And then you're still eating McDonald's and not drinking your water. Like, no,
Right.
we're not going to do that. So to answer your question, I know that was a long answer.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
And so since you mentioned bioidenticals versus synthetic, can you explain the difference between a bioidentical hormone and a non-bioidentical hormone?
Yeah. So bioidentical hormones are made mainly from foods and plants, and they are as close to the same chemical makeup as the hormone that your body is creating. So an example, sometimes they'll make bioidentical progesterone out of wild yams because the same chemical composition that's in the yams is what is in the progesterone that your body is naturally making. And so whenever you take bioidentical hormones, your body is going to recognize that as something that it would already have made in its body. And so therefore it's not going to see it as a toxin and reject it. Whereas a synthetic hormone, this is made in a lab and it's a chemical compound where they try to make it look like it's a hormone. A lot of times your body will reject that because it's not actually the same chemical composition as what your body is making. And so I find it's a slippery slope when you start doing synthetic hormones. I know a lot of people will try to do pellets, or sometimes if you go to a conventional doctor and your estrogen is low, they'll put you on an estrone that's not really the same as what's in your body, or a progestin, which is like a progesterone, and your body is not going to know what to do with it. It's going to see it as a toxin and it's going to cause more harm than good. It also can get addicted to it, whereas you can never come off of those hormones without major symptoms because it's almost like that crutch, that band-aid that's being put there. Whereas if you had just healed your body and given it some bioidentical, then your body's going to see that as natural and it's not going to get dependent on it as it would a synthetic.
Okay. And bioidenticals, people need a prescription for those?
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas, because you mentioned the wild yam, I know a lot of people will use other herbal products that are available, just to anybody, but they're probably not as potent because when you can make something in a lab, you can kind of supercharge it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And too, with bioidentical hormones, if you can find a local practitioner, a naturopath, somebody that can write you a prescription, then they can send you to a compounding pharmacy, and that pharmacy can compound it specifically for you based on your lab work. And so whenever you do that, you're getting something that's as pure as it can be, and it's for you specifically, your bio individual body. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah. And I always recommend creams or oils. I don't recommend oral because they have to go through the gastrointestinal tract and sometimes they're not as potent. Also with pellets, you can't change the dosing. So if you get a dose and it's wrong, you're stuck with those pellets for 3 months and you just stuck with them. So I don't like the pellets because you can't change the dosing. With the compounded creams and oils, you can change that dosing if you need to.
Yeah. That's super helpful. And what you said earlier about the fact that, because you can have totally normal levels of a hormone in a body, and still the organ or the receptor or the cell or whatever that needs to receive that hormone or receive a signal from that hormone may not be able to receive it for some reason.
Yeah, it can be blocked. Like that gland can be blocked a lot of times with the toxins.
Yeah. I had a client, it was like 5 years ago. She was trying to get pregnant. She was going through IVF and they just kept throwing hormones at her. And they're like, your uterine lining won't thicken no matter how much hormone we throw at you. Like it's not thickening, you know? So then we're like, well, how can we influence this in a way, in some other way? Like, how can we make that tissue more receptive and responsive to that hormone? And I love this because I did my master's thesis on fasting. So just even thinking about insulin and how cells are or are not available to receive or give sugar, you know, glucose is so fascinating. It's like each of our body parts, each little cell has a little mechanism in place to be able to receive and to be able to excrete things, you know, and if there's anything messed up with that, it can't work properly. So what we did in that case, and I'd love to see if you have any examples of things that you did, you know, where hormones are normal and you still can't get the result you want. We did yoni steaming and
Mhm.
heat,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So
I
some
love
kind of
noticing.
like
Mhm.
grandma's wisdom thing
Yeah.
that, you know, that's just basically like physics. It's physics,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know? What are some other things that you could think of that will impact the receptivity to a hormone?
Sure. I love to use castor oil packs because this is going to bring blood and oxygen, especially if we're trying to, like you said, get the lining to thicken. I find a castor oil pack is going to bring that blood and oxygen. It's going to pull toxins. It's going to really make that tissue receptive. I also like herbal teas. I have my own blend of puzzle brew tea where I use red raspberry leaf and nettle and some green tea and some rooibos vanilla. And I find that that really helps a lot of women, you know, as far as just opening the endocrine system. And I put some chamomile and nettle for some detox properties. And so I find that really just opens up that endocrine system, lets those toxins out, lets the hormones, you know, really optimizes the gland's ability to make the hormones. So those are probably some of my favorite ways. And two, breathing. I find breathing is super important, you know, just doing the belly breaths and really
Definitely always
oxygenating
breathe,
cells.
everybody.
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
yes. Yeah, but no, deep breathing, just bringing in a lot of oxygen into the cells, I find really opens them up and allows them to perform, you know, optimally.
That's awesome. So you mentioned the estrogen, you mentioned progesterone. Those are two that we talked about. You know, there's signals coming from the brain, areas of the brain, there's signals coming from all over different glands. What about AMH? To me, this is like such a big, difficult animal. And so I will say, sorry, men who are listening, this is definitely more of a female focus. We're talking a lot about the female body today. And people want to know their AMH, especially when they are interested in having a baby, because they want to know if they have enough eggs available to have a baby with, because they think they need a certain number. You know, they think it's a numbers game, right? So, can you explain what is AMH and what is the significance of AMH for our reproductive potential?
Sure. So AMH is anti-Müllerian hormone, and this is a hormone that's inside the follicles that houses your eggs. And before I go any further, I just want to point out that if you were trying to get pregnant naturally, you only need one egg. So your AMH is less important if you're trying to get pregnant naturally versus if you're going through reproductive technology like IVF. That's when AMH is really important because with IVF, the purpose is to stimulate the ovaries so they can get as many eggs as possible. So they're more likely to have a viable egg that they can put with the sperm and create an embryo. Whereas natural fertility, it's less important. You just need that one egg. So I always tell my patient, you know, check AMH. Obviously, we want to see what it is, but don't put all your eggs, hence, no pun intended, all your eggs into that basket because it's less important for natural fertility. The other side of this too is AMH can be improved. So if you get an AMH reading and it is low, less than 1 is less than optimal for IVF. But if you're trying naturally, again, it's less important, and we can improve AMH through targeted nutrition and lifestyle. And then I always say, we want to have one egg, obviously, but we want as high a quality as egg as we can possibly get per cycle. So that's what, when we work on egg quality and AMH, that's going to improve that quality. And so hopefully we're going to get, a super egg to ovulate and make a baby.
Yeah. I just think like you and I are both a little bit older than the majority of people trying to get pregnant in the world today. And when I was, thinking a lot about this, I didn't even consider egg freezing or IVF or anything like that. Especially the egg freezing thing has just gotten so insane. It's almost to the point where women today feel like they have to do it. It's almost like buying insurance. And I think if you're more in a professional job where your employer covers that, it's more likely that you would do that because you see people your age doing it or people younger than you doing it. And there's a lot of social pressure that where people are starting to believe that it's a requirement to freeze your eggs. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about, well, you need that if you're going to go through IVF. But if you're going to try to do it naturally, you don't need that. And also, the quality piece of this. People get so focused on the numbers. You start talking about the quality, and I would imagine we care about the quality of the tissue, the follicle, right? Of the follicle as well, and all the surrounding tissue in the ovary, and the quality of the fallopian tube, and the quality of the uterus, and all of that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why
Yeah.
is it so much easier for us? We get this number. They tell us there's this number. It gives us this tangible thing and it tells us, oh, there's something wrong with you. I need to save you.
Right. Well, I always say if you go to an IVF clinic, they're going to sell you IVF. And so that's what they're going to focus on. How are you a candidate for IVF? Same with egg freezing. I agree with you. Egg freezing has gotten so out of control. And I want to point out to your listeners that just because you freeze your eggs, that doesn't mean you're going to have a baby with those eggs. Those are just eggs, those are not embryos. And so they're selling you this almost guarantee that you're going to have a baby out of this when you're not. Those eggs still have to turn into embryos when they put the sperm with it. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. And then you've spent all this time, all this money, all this heartache to have this insurance policy when it's really not that at all. So I would think twice. If you can freeze an embryo, that's going to be a better bet. But I know a lot of times people, are single or single by choice. They're freezing their eggs. They don't have the option to freeze an embryo. But if you do, that's going to be a better insurance policy than freezing an egg alone.
Yeah. I also don't want to say that I'm knocking IVF because I definitely work with a lot of people who are going through it. But I just think gosh, you don't have to buy into that thing that is happening right now. You just don't have to buy into it. Some people might. Some people might have some serious concerns with their health or their career or something, or some life history that has influenced their ability or desire to have a partner, or like different things like that, or some medical issue that they might have a concern about that would prevent them from being able to have a baby naturally. So I don't want to say I'm knocking it, but for most people, there are other choices, I think.
Yeah,
So
I completely agree. I'm not knocking IVF. I'm so glad that we have that technology, but I just see it day in and day out being recommended to younger and younger people who they don't need IVF yet. Obviously, if you have a medical condition that prevents you from getting pregnant naturally, if you are, I would say 45 plus, then IVF might be your only option. And again, I'm so glad that we have that. But if you're 35, if you're 30 and you have low AMH and they're telling you need IVF, well, I would take a step back and say, okay, well, why do I have low AMH at 30? Let's figure that out because that's not normal. That's not where you should be. And so let's see if we can find the trigger, heal the trigger, and then you can get pregnant naturally. So I completely agree with you on that.
and it's hard because I think once you get that idea that, oh, I might be losing something here, I want to take action on it immediately, right? Because that fear of loss is so painful for people. And then, I guess what is another 6 to 12 months to work on your health in the grand scheme of things? It's really different, right? To a person who's like 35 or 32 or 35, it's really different to them than it is somebody who's like 41,
Yeah.
right? There's really different decisions that I see taking place in those periods. And so maybe we can just sort of send our compassion to everybody dealing with that and give them some tools like, okay, so let's say I have low AMH. I have low AMH. I get my blood test. I run it again, run it 2 times within a couple months just to see, like, did it change? And then, oh, nope, it didn't change. Or it's somewhere roughly around the same. It's not good. And they're telling me I need to freeze my eggs. Now, what are some things that I can do to try to change my AMH?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, well, one, how old are you? Are you 35 or are you 45? So that would make a big difference in, what I recommend for treatment. But let's just say you're 35 years old and you've gotten an AMH that's under 1 and you're trying to improve that. First thing I would say is look at the foundational pieces that we talked about earlier. What does your diet look like? You want to make sure that you are eating that balanced whole food nutrition, adding in a lot of antioxidant rich foods. So these are going to be foods like berries and leafy greens, and think deep, dark colored fruits and vegetables. Antioxidants are going to protect the eggs that you have left from free radicals and really help to optimize them. I would also get on an egg quality supplement. They make supplements that are full of antioxidants, in acetylcysteine and melatonin and, these beautiful antioxidants that really help to optimize the eggs that you have. So those are the first pieces, nutrition, and then a really high quality supplement. And then look at your lifestyle pieces. Like we talked about earlier, stress is the number one killer of fertility. It's going to kill the eggs that you have left. It's going to hurt your ovulation and your cycle. And so look at your life and look at your stress and anything that can be put on the back burner during this time when you're trying to conceive. I would recommend doing that. If not, even looking and saying, okay, is there anything that can be eliminated? Is there anything in my life that's not serving me? What can I put on the back burner or eliminate? I always joke that you can't get rid of your mother-in-law, but you can put a boundary around that relationship. So, and then also looking at how are you detoxing, looking at your environment, how many toxins are you around with your beauty products and your cleaning products? Are you drinking clean filtered water? Are you filtering your air in your house and in your car? Like looking at all of those things that put toxins in your environment, because the toxins, as we talked earlier, they're going to jeopardize your overall health, your fertility, your hormones, but also your egg health and your partner's sperm. So really taking a hard look at the toxins in your environment and eliminating those. And then obviously sleep. When you're sleeping, your body's renewing, recovering, detoxing, your hormones are balancing out, your immune system is recharging. So really making sure you're getting good quality sleep, 7 to 9 hours every night. And everybody listening is probably like, what? It's way too much. But if you're not getting at least 7 hours, you need to ask yourself why not and find what's triggering your inability to sleep. And so those are probably some of the main things that I
We
would
know
say.
what it is. It's
Yeah.
Netflix.
I was about to say the screens. It's the screens.
It's
And they're
Instagram and Netflix.
so addicting. They trigger that dopamine hit and you just want it like a crackhead.
I know.
Yeah.
Or it's working too much. I mean, those nights I'm personally, it's like, oh, I didn't finish this. I didn't finish this. And then, you can't. Oh, we feel for you all. We do it too. We mess up completely. Well, I do. I mess
I
up
do. Yeah.
often, and it's a lifelong practice to try to keep your routines in good order. Okay, but there's just something that bothers me about AMH, right? So AMH, they're going to measure an amount of AMH, right, in the blood. What is going to produce more AMH in the blood? Bigger follicles, more follicles? What are some of the things from a physics perspective, if we think
Yeah.
about that, result in there being more AMH present in the blood?
Yeah, so it's the things that I just mentioned. All of the nutrients, eliminating the toxins and putting in the nutrients, that's going to cause those follicles to produce more of that hormone AMH. And so that's why we see AMH rise, because we're almost like we're optimizing that system in the body to produce more AMH. When the body's healthy and it's working optimally, it is producing the amount of hormones you need, and it's balancing and it's coming into homeostasis, and it's just really working optimally.
So you're saying that the cells themselves in the follicle, right? That they will actually be able to produce more of that
Exactly.
substance.
Yes,
If you give your body what it needs, then the cells will be able to produce more of what the body needs.
exactly. Yes.
Okay. All right. Got it. I think it's important to just kind of like, because AMH is, it's just such a triggering thing for people to have them understand really what it is and how to influence it.
Yeah, for sure.
Why does the blueberry or why does that particular food work? Why does that, it's because at the end of the day, you're getting that cell to function more optimally, right? Because these foods, they have effects. They are used for the nutrients. They're used to replace in, various parts of the body, cells that are existing elsewhere. It's like there's so much amazing stuff happening in the body all the time. So thank you so much for explaining that. All right. This is fun, huh?
I
Okay.
know, we can talk all day.
All right. So if we want to understand our hormones, like we didn't even talk about LH and FSH and like how to tell if we're ovulating and all of those things. But obviously that's a very important thing too. What are some other like key hormonal tests that you think are important if somebody is wanting to know, am I fertile?
Mhm. Yes. So LH and FSH, definitely I would have that done. And that can be a blood test because we're looking for, is your FSH, this is your follicle stimulating hormone. Sometimes as we age and the body's trying really hard to ovulate as we're going closer to perimenopause and then menopause, that number will be really high. And I like to think of it as a pinball machine. It's like the FSH is kind of pulling itself back, like trying to hit that follicle to release that egg, and it just keeps doing it, and that's why it keeps releasing FSH. And so we want to look at that. If that number is really high, we can say, okay, well, what nutrition and lifestyle pieces do we need to do to balance these hormones out? Same with LH. That's your luteinizing hormone that triggers FSH, which triggers estrogen, and then it releases the egg. And so that's what I would do in a blood test. I would test that. I know we've kind of been talking down on blood tests, but getting a full metabolic panel, your CDC with differentials, checking your A1C, and, getting all those blood platelets counts and all of that, that's very important. I would definitely do that in blood work. That's just like basic overall health blood work. And that's
Mhm.
going to be easy to get. You can run it through insurance. It's pretty cheap. We want to make sure that there's no markers of inflammation. There's no issues with your blood sugar and your insulin. And so definitely checking all of that. Then we talked about doing some functional labs with the Dutch test. And so that test is going to not only look at all your sex hormones, but also your thyroid, your adrenal glands, your androgens, all of those pieces, not just the levels, but how you're methylating and detoxing. So that's a very important test. I also recommend a couple of other systems get checked. We haven't even touched on this, but I like to do a GI map or a microbiome analysis, looking at the gut to see, is there any opportunistic bacteria here? Is there anything that's causing leaky gut or inflammation? Is there your estrogen not being detoxed the way that we need it to through the gut? And is that causing inflammation? All of that's going to affect your overall hormonal balance and health. So that's a really important piece to look at as well. Then I like to do, if somebody's over 35, I'll do a DNA analysis looking at genetic SNPs for fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum. So a lot of times I want to see, do you have MTHFR, which is a
Mhm.
gene mutation which causes you not to be able to methylate, which can cause many issues with infertility and hormones. Also, maybe looking at your ability to synthesize your vitamin D. I see this one a lot with fertility, where somebody will do a vitamin D test and it'll either say normal or maybe even a little low, but they're like, I live in Florida and I take vitamin D orally and I'm still low, well, let's look at how you're able to methylate that vitamin D and use it. And so that could be in your genes. So we would look at that. Also, mineral testing. I like to do HTMA testing. So again, blood work is only showing us what's being transported with minerals. When we look in the hair and do an HTMA, that's showing us what's inside the cells. So we can really look to see, okay, what's actually being, used versus just what's being transported.
What's being used from the blood and from the nutrients.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like our ability to convert too over into that.
Exactly.
All right. So with some of these tests, I know it's like tricky. Are there certain ones that you recommend people time to get a more accurate reading because of the hormonal fluctuations that happen throughout the month?
Yes. So anytime you do blood work for hormones, you always want to do day 3 of the menstrual cycle, except for progesterone. And that one I like to see on day 21, which is usually about 5 days past ovulation if you're on a 28-day cycle. And so that's when I would do blood work if you're doing just blood work. If you're doing a Dutch test, that one needs to be 5 to 7 days past ovulation. So really trying to time it within that window. And also try to find a day in that window. If you're on a 28-day cycle, then it's usually day 17 to 21, and try to find a day in that window where you're less stressed. Because again, we're looking at your adrenal glands, we're looking at your cortisol, cortisone, and if you're extra stressed that day, it might give us a false reading. And so that's when I would do those tests.
Okay. What about FSH and LH? Did you say that one already?
Yeah, I would do that on day 3 as well.
On day 3, yeah.
Yeah, and AMH doesn't really matter. You can do that anytime. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the other tests, you can do it anytime in the cycle. So GI map, microbiome analysis, DNA tests, mineral tests, anytime in the cycle.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. I don't know that because I know that a lot of people can go direct to the lab and get blood work run. And definitely a lot of my clients do that. And I don't know that they always tell you when you order the tests when you go by yourself. They don't tell you which day to order it on. So then you don't know that you're actually getting the right kind of reading that you want.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
And I know sometimes it's cheaper and easier to do that, but you have these results and then you don't really know what to do with them. So unless they're working with somebody like you or I would avoid any labs on your own because you just are not going to know how to read them or write a protocol.
Yeah. We'll see. ChatGPT might be able to replace our jobs, so they could just go to the doctor, get their blood work, and then prick their finger, and then ChatGPT will tell them. I mean, that is the world that people are coming to. There's a world where people want to completely computerize medicine. And that's, I think, I don't know how I feel about that. That's a whole other conversation.
I know, right?
But as of right now, you need a human to understand things. Find a human that you can understand from.
Exactly.
It's just going to work better.
Yeah. And ChatGPT doesn't know you as a human. So they're just giving you broad information. They're not looking at all your labs, you as a person, all your symptoms, and putting together a protocol. So as of now, steer clear of ChatGPT and work with the human.
Yeah. Dr. Kela, thank you so much. Yeah. And I'm going to give you the final question today. What does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
Yeah, I always start with the brain, and I feel like it's the belief in yourself that you can heal and that you will heal, and believing that to your core and never letting that go.
Nice. That's really helpful for anybody who's struggling or who does already believe, because we all face these moments of doubt, right? Where it's you got to keep the faith, right? You lose your faith sometimes, especially when you're working on something that you can't control 100% of the things. And
I know.
thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Kela, please tell our audience today if they want to learn more about the Hormone Puzzle podcast or society or any of the work that you do for infertility, please share.
Sure. So the best place to find me is on my website, and that's at hormonepuzzlesociety.com. And there we've got many different digital downloads and blogs and lots of free information for you for fertility, hormones, and overall health. So make sure you go there and take advantage of that. I also have a free gift for your audience, and it's our egg health guide. So they can learn how to optimize their AMH and their egg health. So they can grab that at hormonepuzzlesociety.com/egg-health-guide. So that's that guidebook. And then I also have the podcast, which is the Hormone Puzzle Podcast, everywhere podcasts are heard. So find it on your favorite podcast listening app. And I'm on social media. My favorite place to hang out is Instagram, and that is Kela_health coach and Hormone Puzzle Method. And the last thing, I also run a school for those who want to become fertility coaches. There's 1 in 6 people around the world that needs our help, and I cannot do it alone. So if you've ever thought about pursuing this career, you can learn more about our fertility coach certification course at hormonepuzzlesociety.com/education. So that's all my places.
Yay. Thank you so much. And it's been such a pleasure to have you and to know you and your work. And thank you so much, because like you said, it's 1 in 6 and there's so many people who are struggling with this. And for anybody struggling, we hope this was a helpful conversation for you and that you have some ideas of some things that, might be able to be changeable for you and that you can take the next steps forward.
Sure. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. If you are embarking on a fertility journey and are ready to have your mind blown about what your body is really capable of and how it's impacted by the environment, then check out my book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. You can actually download the introduction to the book for free on my website at heathergrzych.com. That's heathergrzych.com. Read the intro for free and then buy the rest of this fertility enlightening book pretty much anywhere books are sold. Feeling like there's just not enough time in the day? You're not alone. Many of my clients, like Jessica, come to me overwhelmed, struggling and feeling the effects of aging. After just a few Ayurvedic sessions, Jessica was sleeping better, her digestion was regular, and she felt her vitality again. Ayurveda isn't about adding more to your plate. It's about creating balance so you can make time for what matters. Ready to reset your health and your life? Visit heathergrzych.com and book your consultation today. Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrzych.com. That's heathergrzych.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.